The pen trembled in David Adebayo's hand as he watched his wife Amara sign her name on the final divorce decree. His laughter echoed through the Lagos High Court, drawing disapproving stares from other litigants waiting their turn. At 35, David had always been cocky, his broad shoulders and perfectly groomed beard giving him an air of unshakable confidence. Today, dressed in his best navy suit, he felt victorious. "You really thought you could outsmart me, didn't you?" David whispered to Amara, his dark eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "After all these years, you're walking away with nothing while I keep everything we built together." Amara, 32 and elegant even in her pain, sat silently beside her lawyer. Her natural hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her simple black dress spoke of dignity rather than defeat. She hadn't spoken a word since entering the courtroom, her silence driving David's confidence to new heights. The judge, Honorable Justice Adeni, adjusted his glasses and began reading the settlement terms. David's grin widened with each item listed in his favor. The construction company they'd built from scratch, the fleet of luxury cars, the joint bank accounts. Everything was going exactly as he'd planned. The matrimonial home at 15, Banana Island Estate, goes to Mr. Adebayo, the judge continued, and David couldn't suppress a small chuckle. That house was worth over 200 million naira, and Amara had foolishly agreed to let him keep it. But then the judge's voice took on a different tone. "However, we now come to Mrs. Amara Adebayo's separate property acquisitions." David's laughter died in his throat. "Separate property? What's separate property?" Mrs. Adebayo's real estate portfolio, acquired independently during the marriage, includes 27 properties across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, valued at approximately 1.2 billion naira. The courtroom fell dead silent. David's face drained of color as the judge continued reading. Luxury apartments in Victoria Island, commercial buildings in Ikeja, beachfront properties in Lekki. Property after property that Amara had somehow acquired without his knowledge. Additionally, Mrs. Adebayo's investment portfolio includes shares in telecommunications, oil and gas, and technology companies, valued at 800 million naira. David's hands began to shake. His throat felt dry as sandpaper. This can't be right," he stammered, turning to stare at his wife. "Amara, what is this?" For the first time that day, Amara looked directly at him. Her eyes held no anger, no satisfaction, just a cold, quiet strength that made his blood run cold. She stood gracefully, smoothed down her dress, and walked toward the exit without saying a word. "Wait!" David shouted, jumping to his feet. "This has to be a mistake. She doesn't have that kind of money." But as he watched his wife disappear through the courtroom doors, one terrifying thought crashed through his mind. If Amara had been building this empire in secret, what else had she been hiding? Don't you dare stop watching now. Hit that like button if you're as shocked as David, because this is just the beginning of a revenge story that will blow your mind. David sat in his Range Rover outside the courthouse, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The divorce papers lay scattered across his passenger's seat, and every time he glanced at them, his stomach churned with a mixture of disbelief and growing panic. His phone buzzed insistently. Text after text from friends and business associates who had somehow already heard about the court proceedings. Lagos was a small world when it came to high society gossip, and news traveled faster than traffic on 3rd Mainland Bridge. "Guy, I just heard something crazy about your divorce. Call me ASAP. Tund." "David, is it true what they're saying about Amara's properties?" "Chief Williams." "Bro, social media is going mad. You need to see this." "Emeka." David's hands shook as he opened Instagram. The first post that appeared nearly made him drop his phone. Someone had live-tweeted the entire court session. Hashtag Amara Adebayo was already trending, with hundreds of comments praising her for playing the long game and calling her the queen of silent moves. But it was the leaked court documents that made his blood run cold. Property deeds, investment certificates, bank statements. Everything proving that while he'd been celebrating his affair with his secretary Jennifer, Amara had been quietly building an empire that dwarfed his own construction business. His phone rang, and Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. 3 months ago, she'd been the reason he'd decided to leave Amara. 26 years old, ambitious, and willing to do anything to climb the social ladder, including sleeping with her married boss. "David, baby, I just heard." "Not now, Jennifer," he snapped, but she pressed on. "The girls at the office are saying Amara is worth billions. That can't be true, right? You said she was just a housewife who helped with your business sometimes." David's mind raced back through 15 years of marriage. All those times Amara had been visiting her sister or attending church programs. All those business trips she'd taken that he'd barely paid attention to. The separate bank account she'd mentioned once that he'd dismissed as her little savings. "David, are you there?" "I have to go," he mumbled, hanging up the phone. He drove home to their Banana Island mansion in a daze. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Amara's white Mercedes was gone from the garage. Inside the house, the silence was deafening. For the first time in months, he actually looked around at what he'd fought so hard to keep. The house felt empty, hollow. In his greed to claim everything they'd built together, he'd never stopped to wonder what she might have built without him. In the study, he found a single envelope on his desk with his name written in Amara's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., if you want to understand what you really lost." As he stared at the note, his phone buzzed with another notification. This time, it was a video message from an unknown number. The preview showed Amara standing in what looked like a luxury office, and she was no longer alone. If you think David's world is crumbling now, wait until you see who's standing next to his wife in that video. Smash that notification bell, because the next chapter will reveal a betrayal so deep, it'll change everything. David's finger hovered over the play button for what felt like an eternity. The video thumbnail showed Amara in what appeared to be a pristine office space, wearing a crisp white business suit he'd never seen before. Beside her stood a man in an expensive navy suit, his hand resting casually on her shoulder. When David finally pressed play, his world tilted on its axis. "Hello, David." Amara's voice was calm, professional, completely different from the quiet, submissive tone he'd grown accustomed to over the years. "By now, you've learned about my business interests. But there's something else you need to know." The camera pulled back to reveal the man beside her more clearly. David's breath caught in his throat. It was Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries, one of Nigeria's most powerful business empires. At 42, Marcus was everything David pretended to be: genuinely wealthy, internationally connected, and devastatingly handsome. "I'd like you to meet my business partner and, well, let's call him my very close friend," Amara continued, and Marcus smiled, pulling her closer. "Marcus has been instrumental in helping me build my portfolio over the past 5 years." 5 years. David's mind reeled. 5 years she'd been working with Marcus Thompson while he'd been too busy chasing his secretary to notice. "You see, David, while you were busy believing I was just your quiet little wife, I was actually learning from the best. Marcus showed me how real business is done, how real relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and genuine partnership." The video showed glimpses of the office around them, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Lagoon, expensive art on the walls, and a conference table where several other business people were seated, all watching the recording with knowing smiles. The property portfolio was just the beginning. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice smooth and confident. "Amara has been my silent partner in several major deals. She's brilliant, David. Absolutely brilliant. I'm amazed you never noticed." David's phone slipped from his trembling hands, clattering onto the marble floor of his study. He scrambled to retrieve it, desperate to see the rest of the message. "The address in the envelope will bring you to my new office tomorrow," Amara continued. "Not because I owe you an explanation, but because I want you to see exactly what you threw away when you decided Jennifer was more important than our marriage." The video ended with a shot of Marcus kissing Amara's cheek while she smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in months. David sank into his leather chair, his chest tight with panic. Marcus Thompson. The Marcus Thompson was not just her business partner, but clearly much more. How had he missed this? How had his wife, the woman he dismissed as a simple housewife, managed to infiltrate one of Nigeria's most exclusive business circles. His phone rang again. This time it was his lawyer, Barrister Adeyemi. "David, we have a problem. I just received a call from Mrs. Adebayo's legal team. They're filing additional papers tomorrow morning. Something about business interference and defamation. And there's something else. What else could there possibly be?" David's voice cracked. "Your construction contracts. The ones with Thompson Industries subsidiaries. They're all being reviewed for immediate cancellation. David, those contracts represent 60% of your annual revenue." The phone fell from David's numb fingers as the full scope of his situation became clear. Amara hadn't just left him. She'd positioned herself to destroy everything he'd built. You think you've seen betrayal? Wait until you discover what Amara has planned for tomorrow's meeting. Click that subscribe button because the next chapter reveals a confrontation that will leave David begging for mercy. David barely slept that night. He spent hours pacing the empty mansion, his mind spinning with questions that had no answers. At 6 a.m., he was already dressed in his best suit, attempting to project confidence he didn't feel. The address Amara had given him led to a gleaming 40-story tower in Victoria Island that he'd driven past countless times but never really noticed. The lobby was all marble and gold, with security guards who clearly belonged in a president's detail. When David gave his name, he was immediately escorted to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. The elevator climbed to the 40th floor without stopping. The doors opened to reveal a reception area that screamed serious money. The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover, smiled at him with professional courtesy. "Mr. Adebayo, they're waiting for you in the conference room." David's palms were sweating as he followed her down a hallway lined with photographs of major construction projects across Africa. His breath caught when he recognized several buildings he'd admired but never knew who developed them. The conference room doors opened, and David stepped into what felt like a corporate war room. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a breathtaking view of Lagos Harbor. At the head of a massive glass table sat Amara, but this wasn't the woman he'd been married to for 15 years. This Amara wore a tailored burgundy suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her natural hair was styled in a sophisticated cut that framed her face perfectly. Diamond earrings caught the light as she turned her head to acknowledge him. She looked like she belonged in boardrooms with presidents and oil ministers. "David, thank you for coming," she said, her voice carrying an authority he'd never heard before. "Please have a seat." Marcus Thompson sat to her right, flanked by 3 other people David didn't recognize but who clearly wielded serious power. Their expensive clothes, confident postures, and the way they watched him enter suggested these were not people to be underestimated. "I suppose you're wondering how this happened," Amara began, sliding a tablet across the table to him. 7 years ago, when you were working on that small office building in Acadia, you complained constantly about how the clients were wasting money on unnecessary amenities. Do you remember?" David nodded mutely, his throat too tight to speak. "I attended one of the site meetings with you. Afterward, I approached the client privately and suggested several cost-effective improvements that would increase the building's value. They were impressed. Very impressed. The tablet showed photographs of that building, but it looked nothing like David remembered. Where there had once been a modest office complex, now stood a stunning mixed-use development with retail spaces, luxury apartments, and premium office suites. That client introduced me to Marcus. Marcus introduced me to opportunities you could never imagine. While you were building single-family homes and small commercial projects, I was learning to think bigger. Much bigger." Marcus leaned forward, his expression almost sympathetic. "David, your wife is a visionary. In 7 years, she's been involved in developments worth over 15 billion naira. She's not just wealthy. She's a major player in West African real estate development." "The divorce was never about money," Amara continued, her dark eyes fixed on David's face. "It was about respect, about partnership, about building something meaningful together. But you were so busy chasing Jennifer, so certain that I was just your simple, grateful wife that you never bothered to ask what I was actually doing with my time." David found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "What do you want from me?" Amara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Your construction company depends on subcontracts from larger developers. Developers like us." She gestured around the table. "As of this morning, those contracts are void." One of the other executives, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s, spoke for the first time. "Mr. Adebayo, your company owes 47 million naira in outstanding payments to various suppliers. Without those Thompson Industries contracts, how do you plan to meet those obligations?" David's world began to spin. 47 million naira. He hadn't realized his cash flow was that tight. "There is, however, a possibility for accommodation," Amara said, standing gracefully. "If you're willing to accept certain terms." What terms could Amara possibly have in mind? Hit that like button if you're dying to know what she's planning for David, because the next chapter reveals an offer so shocking, it'll change both their lives forever. David stared at the contract placed in front of him, his hands shaking as he tried to process the words on the page. The conference room had fallen silent except for the gentle hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of Lagos traffic 40 floors below. "You want me to work for you?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Not for me, David. With me." Amara's correction was sharp, precise. "Your construction skills are actually quite good. Your problem has always been vision and scale. This partnership would give you both." Marcus Thompson opened a leather portfolio and spread several architectural drawings across the table. David's breath caught as he recognized the scope of what he was seeing, a massive mixed-use development that would rival anything in Dubai or New York. "Marina Bay City," Marcus explained, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who'd built empires. 48 floors of luxury residences, commercial spaces, and a 5-star hotel. "The contract is worth 2.8 billion naira, and we want your company to handle the primary construction." David's mind reeled. 2.8 billion naira was more money than he'd seen in his entire career. It was the kind of project that would establish his company as a major player in Nigerian construction. But Amara continued, her tone businesslike. "There are conditions." She slid another document across the table. David scanned it quickly, his confusion deepening with each clause. "You want 60% of my company. We want controlling interest in a business partnership, yes. Your construction expertise combined with our capital, connections, and development experience. It's actually quite generous, considering your current financial situation." The sharp-faced woman, who David now realized was probably a lawyer, leaned forward. "Mr. Adebayo, without this partnership, your company will be bankrupt within 6 weeks. Your suppliers are already discussing legal action, and without the Thompson Industries contracts, you have no revenue stream to cover your outstanding debts." David's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at it and saw Jennifer's name. We looked up. Amara was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Answer it," she said simply. "Jennifer, I can't talk right now." "David, baby, you need to come to the office right now." Jennifer's voice was high, panicked. "There are men here with papers, and they're saying something about seizing equipment for unpaid debts. The workers are all asking if they're going to get paid, and I don't know what to tell them." "What men? What papers?" "I don't know. They have badges and official-looking documents, and they're taking pictures of all the machinery." David's face went pale as he ended the call. Around the table, the executives watched him with expressions ranging from sympathy to cold calculation. "Asset seizure," the lawyer said matter-of-factly. "Standard procedure when a company defaults on supplier payments. Your equipment is probably worth about 12 million naira. That leaves you 35 million short." However, Amara stood and walked to the window, her silhouette framed against the Lagos skyline. "Sign this partnership agreement, and those debts become our shared responsibility. We clear your obligations. You maintain operational control of day-to-day construction activities, and everyone wins." David stared at the contract again. The terms were actually generous, more generous than he deserved, considering how spectacularly he'd mismanaged both his business and his marriage. But signing meant admitting that everything he'd believed about himself, about his success, about his importance had been an illusion. "There's one more condition," Marcus said quietly. David looked up, dreading whatever was coming next. "Jennifer Wilson, your secretary. She's been selling information about your projects to your competitors for the past 18 months. We have documented evidence." The room began to spin. David gripped the edge of the table, his vision blurring. That's impossible." Amara returned to the table and placed a thick folder in front of him. Bank records, email communications, photographs of meetings with Emica Construction and Davies and Associates. She's been feeding them your bid information in exchange for a percentage of the contracts they won. David opened the folder with trembling hands. The evidence was undeniable. Jennifer's signature on bank deposit slips, email threads discussing his private business plans, even photographs of her meeting with his biggest competitors. "She's been playing you, David, both professionally and personally." His phone rang again. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen, and this time, everyone in the room could hear her voice clearly. "David, where are you? These men are saying something about fraud investigations, and they want to talk to me about some emails. I'm scared, baby. You have to come help me." David stared at the phone as it went silent, then looked around the table at faces that showed no surprise, no shock, only the calm expressions of people who had known this moment was coming. "You think Jennifer's betrayal is the worst of it? Wait until you see what evidence Amara has been collecting about David's business practices. Hit that notification bell, because the next chapter exposes secrets that could destroy more than just his company." David's signature on the partnership agreement felt like signing his own death warrant, but the alternative was immediate bankruptcy and possible criminal charges. As ink dried on the pages that transferred 60% of his life's work to his ex-wife and her business partner, his phone continued buzzing with increasingly desperate calls from Jennifer. "I should probably go deal with this," he said, standing on unsteady legs. "Actually, you should stay," Marcus replied calmly, sliding another folder across the table. "The fraud investigation isn't just about Jennifer's activities. It's about yours." David's blood turned to ice as he opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of invoices he recognized, bank statements from accounts he'd thought were private, and contracts he'd signed years ago. Building materials purchased at wholesale prices but billed to clients at premium rates, the lawyer explained, her voice clinical and detached. Subcontractor payments that were supposed to go to legitimate companies but were actually deposited into shell accounts controlled by you. Tax declarations that significantly underreported your company's actual revenue. David's voice failed him as he flipped through page after page of evidence. "How did you get all this?" Amara's expression remained neutral, businesslike. "David, you used our joint business account for most of these transactions. As a signatory on that account, I had access to all records. 7 years ago, when I first started learning about real business practices from Marcus, I began documenting everything." 7 years. David's mind was reeling. "You've been investigating me for 7 years. I've been protecting myself for 7 years, Amara corrected. "When I realized you were using questionable accounting practices, I had to ensure I wouldn't be held legally responsible for your decisions." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression almost sympathetic. "David, the total amount of fraudulent billing and tax evasion comes to approximately 89 million naira over 6 years. That's enough to put you in prison for a very long time." David's phone rang again. This time it was his lawyer, Barrister Adeyemi. "David, you need to get down here immediately. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has just served a warrant to search your offices and personal accounts. They're talking about money laundering and tax evasion charges." "The EFCC?" David's voice cracked. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission didn't waste time on small cases. If they were involved, this was serious. "Where are you right now? Don't go home. Don't go to the office. Meet me in my chambers immediately." David hung up the phone and looked around the conference room. Everyone was watching him with the calm attention of people who had orchestrated every detail of this moment. "You did this," he whispered. "You called the EFCC. Actually, the sharp-faced lawyer spoke up. "An anonymous tip was received 3 days ago. Someone provided them with comprehensive evidence of financial irregularities in your company's operations. The investigation is entirely legitimate. David slumped in his chair, the full scope of his situation finally becoming clear. His ex-wife hadn't just divorced him and taken her own wealth. She'd systematically documented every questionable decision he'd made over the past 6 years and handed it all to federal investigators. However, Amara said quietly, "There's a way through this." David looked up at her, desperate hope flickering in his eyes. "The partnership agreement you just signed includes a clause requiring full financial transparency and compliance with all federal regulations. As majority partners, we would be responsible for ensuring your company meets all legal and ethical standards going forward." Marcus nodded. "We would also be in a position to negotiate with investigators on behalf of the company. Settlement rather than prosecution. Full compliance and restitution rather than prison time." "You're offering to save me from prison?" "We're offering you a chance to rebuild legitimately," Amara corrected. "The Marina Bay City project is real, David. 2.8 billion naira in clean, legal, fully documented business. You could be part of something significant, something you could actually be proud of." David's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "David, they arrested me. They say I'm being charged with conspiracy and fraud. You have to help me." He stared at the message, then looked up at his ex-wife. This woman he'd underestimated for 15 years had systematically dismantled his life and was now offering to rebuild it under her terms. "What exactly do you want from me, Amara?" She smiled, and for the first time since the divorce proceedings, it looked genuine. "I want my business partner to be someone I can trust. Someone who understands that success built on lies and betrayal always collapses eventually." As David sat in that gleaming conference room, 40 floors above the chaos consuming his old life, he realized he was facing the most important decision of his life. And this time, he couldn't afford to choose wrong. Do you think David will accept Amara's offer? Or is there another twist coming that will change everything again? Smash that like button and hit subscribe, because the next chapter reveals a secret that will shock everyone, including Amara. 3 weeks later, David stood in the construction trailer at the Marina Bay City site, watching crews prepare the foundation for what would become Lagos's most ambitious development project. The partnership with Amara and Marcus had moved forward with surprising efficiency. His debts had been cleared, the EFCC investigation had been resolved through a substantial settlement payment, and Jennifer was facing 2 years in minimum security prison for fraud conspiracy. But something felt wrong. David had always prided himself on reading people and situations, and lately, he'd been noticing things that didn't quite add up. Small inconsistencies in conversations, momentary exchanges of glances between Amara and Marcus that seemed too comfortable, too intimate for recent business partners. His suspicions crystallized when he overheard a phone conversation he wasn't meant to hear. "Baby, I know this is hard, but we're almost finished." Amara's voice carried clearly through the thin walls of the site office. "Once the Marina Bay project is fully funded and construction begins, we can tell David the truth about us." David froze outside the office door, his blood running cold. "I hate lying to him." Marcus's voice was equally clear. "He may be an arrogant fool, but he doesn't deserve this level of deception." "Marcus, we've been planning this for 3 years. The divorce, the business partnership, everything. David signed away 60% of his company to us. In 6 months, when the project is completed, we'll have controlling interests in both the development company and the construction firm. We'll own everything." David's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. The divorce hadn't been about his affair with Jennifer. It had been orchestrated. The financial evidence, the EFCC investigation, even Jennifer's betrayal had all been part of a larger plan to force him into this partnership. "What about the other investors?" Marcus asked. "Are they still committed to the additional phases?" The Chinese consortium confirmed this morning. 42 billion naira for the second phase, contingent on successful completion of Marina Bay. "Once we prove we can deliver a project of this scale, we'll have access to development funds that will make us the largest private developers in West Africa." 42 billion naira. David's hands shook as he processed the numbers. They weren't just stealing his company. They were using it as a stepping stone to build an empire worth hundreds of billions. And David will have his 30% and a comfortable life managing construction operations. He'll never understand the bigger picture, and by the time he realizes what happened, it'll be too late to matter. David backed away from the office quietly, his mind spinning with rage and disbelief. His phone buzzed with a text from Emeka, his old friend and business rival. "Guy, I need to tell you something important about your wife and Marcus Thompson. Can we meet tonight?" David stared at the message, realization dawning. If Emeka knew something about Amara and Marcus, it meant their relationship had been visible to others long before the divorce. How many people had been watching his marriage fall apart while he remained obliviously focused on Jennifer? He drove home to the Banana Island mansion in a fog of fury and humiliation. The house felt different now, knowing that Amara had been playing a long game while living under the same roof. Every conversation, every quiet evening, every moment of what he'd thought was domestic tranquility had been a performance. That evening, he met Emeka at a quiet bar in Victoria Island. His friend's expression was grave as David approached the corner booth. "David, I should have told you this 2 years ago, but I didn't know how. Just tell me now. Amara and Marcus Thompson have been together for at least 4 years. I saw them together at business conferences in Abuja and Dubai. They weren't just business partners, Guy. They were intimate. Very intimate." David's jaw clenched. "For years. Maybe longer. And David, there's something else. The Marina Bay City project? It was Marcus's idea from the beginning, but the preliminary designs were done 3 years ago, long before your divorce proceedings started." The implications hit David like a physical blow. Not only had Amara been cheating on him, but she and Marcus had been planning to steal his business for years. The divorce, the financial investigation, even his relationship with Jennifer. Everything had been orchestrated to put him in a position where he'd have no choice but to accept their partnership terms. "There's one more thing," Emeka continued hesitantly. "Jennifer didn't betray you willingly. Marcus's people approached her 18 months ago and threatened to expose some financial problems her family was having unless she cooperated. She was being blackmailed, David." David stared at his friend, the final pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Jennifer hadn't betrayed him out of greed. She'd been coerced into it as part of Amara and Marcus's larger scheme. "What are you going to do?" Emeka asked quietly. David finished his drink and stood up, his expression hard with determination. "I'm going to remind them that I've been playing games longer than they realize." As he walked out of the bar, David's phone rang. It was Amara, her voice warm and concerned. "David, honey, you missed our dinner meeting with the Chinese investors. Is everything all right?" "Everything's perfect," David replied, his voice steady and calm. "I'll see you tomorrow morning. We have a lot to discuss about the future of our partnership." David knows the truth, but does he have what it takes to outsmart the people who orchestrated his downfall? Hit that subscribe button because the next chapter reveals David's counterattack, and it's going to be absolutely devastating. David spent the entire night in his study, surrounded by documents, laptops, and 3 phones. If Amara and Marcus thought they were the only ones capable of playing the long game, they were about to learn how wrong they'd been. By sunrise, he made 17 phone calls to contacts across 3 continents and had pieced together a plan that would make their deception look like child's play. The key had been understanding what Marcus and Amara didn't know about his own business operations. While they'd been focused on his construction company, they completely overlooked the fact that David had spent 10 years building relationships with international contractors and suppliers. Relationships that came with certain advantages. At 8 a.m. sharp, David walked into the Marina Bay City side office carrying a steel briefcase and wearing his most confident smile. Amara and Marcus were already there, reviewing architectural plans with the Chinese investors' advance team. "Good morning, partners," David said cheerfully, setting his briefcase on the conference table with a loud thunk that made everyone look up. "David, perfect timing," Marcus replied, though his eyes flickered with slight concern at David's unusually jovial mood. "We were just discussing the foundation specifications with Mr. Chen's engineering team." "Excellent. Before we continue, I have some exciting news to share about our project financing." David opened his briefcase and began placing documents on the table with theatrical precision. Last night, I received confirmation from my contacts at Deutsche Bank Frankfurt and Standard Chartered Dubai. They're very interested in providing alternative financing for Marina Bay City. Amara's smile faltered slightly. Alternative financing? David, we already have committed investors. Oh, I know about the Chinese consortium, David replied casually, enjoying the flash of panic that crossed Marcus's face. 42 billion naira for Phase 2, contingent on successful completion of Phase 1. Very impressive. The room fell silent. The Chinese advance team exchanged glances, clearly surprised that David knew details they thought were confidential. However, David continued, my banking contacts have identified some interesting irregularities in the consortium's funding structure. He slid a thick folder toward Mr. Chun, the lead Chinese representative. It seems your primary investors include 3 companies that are currently under investigation by Hong Kong financial regulators for money laundering and currency manipulation. Mr. Chin's face went pale as he opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. This is not possible, he stammered. Our due diligence was comprehensive. I'm sure it was, David replied sympathetically. Unfortunately, Nigerian banking regulations require extensive background checks on any foreign investment over 10 billion naira. The Central Bank of Nigeria has already flagged these irregularities and will likely freeze any funds transfer from the consortium pending investigation. Marcus leaned forward, his composure cracking. David, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that your 42 billion naira just vanished, David replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But don't worry, I have a solution. He placed another set of documents on the table. Deutsche Bank is prepared to provide bridge financing for the entire Marina Bay City development. All phases, total project value of 68 billion naira at preferential rates. Amara was staring at him with growing alarm. What are the terms? Standard international development terms. The financing bank requires controlling interest in the development company during the construction phase, with ownership reverting to the original partners upon successful completion and full repayment. Controlling interest meaning what percentage? Marcus's voice was tight. 75%. The silence in the room was deafening. David watched as Amara and Marcus realized their carefully orchestrated plan was crumbling in real time. That's completely unacceptable, Amara said, her voice rising for the first time since David had known her to lose composure in a business setting. Is it? David asked mildly. Because according to the partnership agreement you had me sign, any partner can seek alternative financing if the originally proposed funding becomes unavailable. And since I'm the one with the banking relationships. He shrugged elegantly. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. David, we need to discuss this privately. Actually, we don't. David's voice hardened. You see, Marcus, I know about your 4-year relationship with my wife. I know about the preliminary designs for Marina Bay City that were completed before our divorce. I know about Jennifer being blackmailed into cooperating with your scheme. And I know about the shell companies you've been using to hide assets from tax authorities. The Chinese representatives began gathering their papers, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the meeting had taken. Mr. Chun, David addressed them directly. I apologize for this awkward situation, but I thought you should know that the Nigerian partners you've been dealing with have been operating under false pretenses. Mrs. Adebayo and Mr. Thompson orchestrated an elaborate scheme to defraud me of my business interests. I have documented evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and international money laundering. Mr. Chun stood immediately. We cannot be associated with such irregularities. Our company's reputation cannot be compromised. As the Chinese team filed out of the office, Amara finally exploded. You arrogant, vindictive. Careful, David interrupted smoothly. We're still married in the eyes of international banking law until all property transfers are finalized. Anything you say right now could be considered marital communications and therefore inadmissible in court proceedings. Marcus was staring at David with something approaching respect. How long have you known? About your affair? About 6 months. About the business conspiracy? Since yesterday. About your money laundering operations? David smiled coldly. Since about 3 this morning, when my contacts at Interpol confirmed your involvement with several questionable transactions in Dubai and Switzerland. Amara sank into her chair, the reality of their situation finally hitting her. What do you want, David? What I want is quite simple, David replied, closing his briefcase with a sharp click. I want you to understand that while you were playing checkers, I've been learning to play chess. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? Your assets in Switzerland have been frozen pending investigation. Apparently, someone provided Swiss banking authorities with evidence of currency manipulation and tax evasion. Amazing how quickly these international investigations move when they have proper documentation. As David reached for the door handle, his phone rang. It was Jennifer, calling from prison. David? David, I'm so sorry about everything. They told me if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt my family. I never wanted to betray you. David looked back at Amara and Marcus, both of whom could hear Jennifer's voice clearly through the speakerphone. Jennifer, it's okay. I understand now. And don't worry, your sentence is about to be significantly reduced. It turns out cooperating with a federal investigation into international money laundering carries certain benefits. He ended the call and smiled at his ex-wife one final time. The Deutsche Bank representatives will be here at 2 p.m. to discuss new partnership terms. I suggest you both get very good lawyers. You're going to need them. David just flipped the script on everyone. But is this really the end of Amara and Marcus's plan? Or do they have one final card to play? Hit that like button if you're Team David right now, because the next chapter brings a twist so unexpected, it'll leave everyone questioning everything. David's victory celebration was cut short by an urgent phone call at 6 a.m. the following morning. It was Barrister Adeyemi, his lawyer, and the man's voice carried a level of panic David had never heard before. David, you need to get to my office immediately. Don't talk to anyone, don't answer your phone, and whatever you do, don't go to the construction site. What's happening? Just get here. Now. 40 minutes later, David sat in his lawyer's office, staring at documents that made his blood run cold. Spread across the mahogany desk were bank statements, wire transfer records, and what appeared to be a comprehensive financial audit of his personal and business accounts. David, where did the money come from? Barrister Adeyemi's voice was grim. What money? The 847 million naira that appeared in your personal accounts over the past 3 months. Money that seems to have originated from Deutsche Bank Frankfurt, routed through several shell companies in the Cayman Islands. David's mouth went dry. That's impossible. I never received any money from Deutsche Bank. The wire transfer records say otherwise. And David, this isn't just about unexplained income. The Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit believes this money is connected to an international money laundering operation. His lawyer placed another document in front of him. This is a freeze order on all your assets, effective immediately. Your accounts, your properties, your business interests. Everything is frozen pending investigation. David's mind raced. This has to be Amara and Marcus. They're framing me. It gets worse, Barrister Adeyemi continued. The Deutsche Bank representatives you mentioned yesterday, they don't exist. The bank has no record of any financing offer from Marina Bay City. No record of any contact with you whatsoever. The room began to spin. David gripped the arms of his chair, struggling to process what he was hearing. Someone has been impersonating Deutsche Bank officials, David. Someone with access to sophisticated banking infrastructure and the ability to create convincing false documentation. The real question is, who has that kind of resources and why are they targeting you? David's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You have 30 minutes to respond before this goes public. A friend. With trembling hands, David opened his email. The message contained a single video attachment and a brief note. Press play, then call the number below. The video showed David in what appeared to be a luxury hotel suite, engaged in intimate activities with a woman who wasn't Amara, wasn't Jennifer, and whom David had never seen before in his life. The timestamp showed the footage was recorded 3 days ago, during the time he thought he'd been orchestrating his revenge against Amara and Marcus. This is fake, David whispered, staring at the screen. This never happened. I've never seen this woman before. But even as he spoke, David realized how sophisticated the fabrication was. The video quality was perfect, the lighting natural, and his face was clearly visible throughout. If he hadn't known it was impossible, he would have believed it was real. His phone rang immediately. The caller ID showed only a number. David Adebayo. He answered, his voice barely steady. Mr. Adebayo, I think we should meet. The voice was smooth, professional, completely unfamiliar. You're wondering how we created such convincing evidence of activities that never occurred. You're wondering who has the resources to fabricate banking records, wire transfer documents, and video footage that could fool federal investigators. Who is this? Someone who's been watching your little game with great interest. Your ex-wife and Mr. Thompson are talented amateurs, David. But they're working for professionals now. People who don't appreciate having their operations disrupted by vengeful husbands with international banking connections. David's blood turned to ice. What do you want? We want you to understand that the game has changed. This is no longer about a divorce or a construction company or even Marina Bay City. This is about a financial network worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and you've become a complication. I don't understand. You will. The address is in your email. 1 hour. Come alone, and David, bring your appetite for the truth. Because everything you think you know about your situation is about to change. The line went dead. David stared at his phone, then looked up at his lawyer's concerned face. Barrister, I need you to prepare for the worst. If something happens to me, I want you to know that whatever evidence appears against me is fabricated. All of it. David, where are you going? To find out who's really been playing chess. As David walked out of the office, his phone buzzed with one final message from Amara. David, we need to talk. Marcus and I aren't your enemies. We never were. You're in more danger than you realize, and we might be the only people who can help you now. Everything David thought he knew is about to be shattered. Who are these mysterious professionals, and how deep does this conspiracy really go? Smash that subscribe button, because the final chapter reveals the shocking truth that will change everything you thought you knew about this story. The address led David to a nondescript office building in Ikoyi, the kind of place that housed consulting firms and import-export businesses. But as he rode the elevator to the 12th floor, David noticed details that suggested this was no ordinary commercial building. Security cameras every few feet, reinforced steel doors, and elevator panels that required keycards for access. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that looked like it belonged in a European embassy. Behind an elegant desk sat a woman who could have been a diplomat's secretary, her smile polite, but her eyes sharp with intelligence. Mr. Adebayo, they're expecting you in the conference room. The conference room was smaller than the one at Thompson Industries, but infinitely more intimidating. 3 people sat around an oval table, 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they'd stepped out of an international business magazine, and a woman whose presence commanded immediate attention. She appeared to be in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Her silver hair was styled with precision, and when she looked up at David, her eyes held the kind of intelligence that missed nothing. Mr. Adebayo, please sit. I'm Victoria Okafor, and these are my associates, Mr. Hassan and Mr. Rodriguez. Her accent was cultured, international, the voice of someone equally at home in Lagos, London, or New York. Who are you people? We represent certain interests in West African development projects, she replied smoothly. Interests that have been significantly impacted by your recent activities. David noticed that Mr. Rodriguez was reviewing what appeared to be a comprehensive file on his life, photographs, documents, bank statements going back years. The Marina Bay City project was never about real estate development, David. It was about establishing a legitimate front for moving approximately 200 billion naira through the Nigerian financial system over the next 5 years. David's breath caught. Money laundering. Financial services, Victoria corrected delicately. Our clients include governments, multinational corporations, and private individuals who require discrete methods for managing international assets. Nigeria's growing economy and relatively flexible banking regulations make it an ideal location for such operations. And Amara? Marcus. Ms. Thompson, excuse me, Ms. Adebayo, approached us 2 years ago with a proposal. She understood that her husband possessed construction expertise that could be valuable to our operations, but she also recognized that his ethical limitations and lack of discretion made him unsuitable for direct involvement. Victoria opened a laptop and turned it toward David. The screen showed a complex organizational chart that made his head spin. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Orchestrate a divorce that would give us controlling interest in your construction company through Ms. Adebayo's partnership with Mr. Thompson, who has been facilitating our Nigerian operations for 3 years. Use your company's legitimate construction activities to justify massive financial transactions. Everyone profits, and you continue running construction operations without ever knowing about the larger picture. But I disrupted the plan. Spectacularly. Mr. Hassan spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight accent David couldn't place. Your investigation into the Chinese consortium's funding sources was unfortunately accurate. Those companies are indeed under investigation, which means we need alternative methods for moving our clients' assets. David's mind raced as he began to understand the full scope of what he'd stumbled into. The Deutsche Bank fraud, the fabricated video, that was you. We needed to demonstrate that your recent success was built on illegal activities, Victoria confirmed. If you're going to prison for financial crimes, you can hardly expose anyone else's operations, can you? But there's another option, Mr. Rodriguez said, closing David's file and looking directly at him. You could choose to work with us voluntarily. Victoria smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuinely warm. David, your construction company is actually quite impressive. Your international contacts, your reputation for quality work, your understanding of complex project logistics, these are valuable assets. More valuable than you realize. She placed another document on the table. This is a legitimate contract for construction management services across 12 West African countries. Total project value, 340 billion naira over 7 years. Clean money, legal projects, genuine development that will improve infrastructure across the region. David scanned the contract, his eyes widening at the scope of what was being offered. Hospitals, schools, transportation infrastructure, telecommunications networks, projects that could transform entire countries. The catch? No catch, Victoria replied. But these projects require absolute discretion and complete cooperation with our financial management protocols. You would be building real infrastructure, employing thousands of people, contributing to genuine economic development. But you would also be facilitating certain financial flows that our clients require. And if I refuse, the fabricated evidence against you is already in the hands of federal investigators. Your ex-wife and Mr. Thompson will testify that you threatened them and attempted to extort them. Ms. Wilson will corroborate their testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. You'll spend 15 years in prison while your assets are seized and distributed. David sat quietly for several minutes, processing everything he'd learned. Finally, he looked up at Victoria. What about Amara and Marcus? They continue as regional coordinators. Your ex-wife is quite brilliant, actually. This entire scenario was largely her design. David's phone buzzed with a text from Amara. The meeting isn't going as you expected, is it? There's still time to make the right choice. We can all win, David. He stared at the message, then looked around the conference room at faces that watched him with patient confidence. How long do I have to decide? Victoria, check her watch. The federal arrest warrant will be issued at 5 p.m. today unless we intervene. So you have about 3 hours. As David left the building, his mind spinning with possibilities and consequences, he realized that the game had never been about winning or losing. It had always been about discovering who was really in control. His phone rang one final time. It was Jennifer calling from prison. David, there's something I never told you about the night this all started. The story ends where it began, with secrets, betrayal, and the devastating realization that sometimes the person you trust least might be the only one telling the truth. Did David make the right choice? Hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking stories that prove truth really is stranger than fiction.